doing here, this is an amazing space, right? South by Southwest is first and foremost about the people. It's filled with unbelievable people with creative ideas and passion about what they're doing. And so one of the things you'll find as you engage in the space is that there's a lot of trouble that goes on, but that's also part of the joy. But there's another thing that I really like about this conference, and it's our fearless leader, Hugh. He has been phenomenal at actually bringing some of the most diverse and interesting people to actually engage with one another. So I actually want to take a moment to say thank you, Hugh, for all that you've done for this conference. So I was asked to come and talk to you and give you some sort of provocation, some way of inviting you to think deeply. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a social media researcher. I'm an ethnographer. I spend most of my time trying to understand how people use social media as part of their daily lives. I drive around the US, I spend a lot of time talking to teenagers and their families. And I also spend a lot of time trying to reflect and make that material public. I've been blogging for 13 years, and I believe in the power of actually engaging with a public audience. I've also believed in being an activist, and one of the things that's really important to me is to sort of challenge the status quo in order to help create a future that we want to live in. What keeps me up at night is very much about how social media transforms society, and more importantly, what it makes visible about humanity. So technophobes love to talk about like how it's totally destroying society, and a lot of the sort of people who really love technology think it's the great transformation. Everything is going to be fantastic because of technology. And I find myself living between these two different worlds and trying to keep people in a more grounded way, to try to remind everybody that there's actually much more nuance and detail. And reality is always in those details. My goal today is to ask you to sort of sit back and think about a specific set of puzzles that I've been working on. And part of this is because all of you are involved in social media at some level. Some of you are building these systems. Some of you are very much using them for various tools. Some of you are watching as your kids use them. All of you are seeing how they shape society. But there's a set of puzzles that I think are really critical to think about how they're woven in. Puzzles that I think are going to be essential to the future of how we think about social media. And I think a lot of that has to do with the intersection of privacy and publicity. So my talk today is to get you to think through different ideas of how privacy and publicity intertwine. All right, let's begin. No matter how many times a privileged, straight, white, male technology executive tells you that privacy is dead, let me tell you this is not true. Right? Privacy is not dead. People very much care about privacy regardless of how old they are. And they care about it just as much online as they care about it offline. But the challenge is that what privacy means may not be what you think. Fundamentally, privacy is about having control over how information flows. It's about being able to understand a social setting, to understand the context, to understand what is appropriate and how to behave. It's about understanding what the architecture will allow you to do and being able to negotiate within that. And when people feel as though they don't have control over their environment, they don't have control over their setting, then they feel as though their privacy has been violated, and they scream privacy foul. Now, to get at the challenges of privacy, let's consider a recent privacy fail, right? Google Buzz. Now, what the outrage around Buzz shows us is that people care deeply about privacy. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of people will love Buzz, a lot of people will use Buzz. It will be extremely popular, but that doesn't mean that Google didn't mess up when it comes to privacy. And they're taking a hit in terms of the trust that they have, and they're taking a hit in terms of how people are experiencing it. For those of you who managed to miss Google Buzz, it's basically a stream a la Twitter or Facebook's feed with content populated by people that you've chosen to follow. When the service is situated within Gmail, and users first experienced it by going to Gmail and asking if they wanted to be a part of Buzz. When they said they wanted to explore it, they were prompted to give information. This information was given to create their profile if they didn't already have one. And they were given a pop-up of users that Buzz calculated are the people that Buzz thought they wanted to follow. These people were listed with sort of check marks, and if you sort of clicked on through, you accepted all of these people as the people you're going to follow. The default list was calculated from within the system, and it was put publicly and made available via the profile. Likewise, other public features of Google were on profile. Now, nothing that the Buzz team did was technologically wrong. There were all sorts of opt-outs available. Opt-out of Buzz, opt-out of the default lists, opt-out of displaying the lists, ways of changing what was available. Yet the service resulted in a complete PR disaster. So why? I'd argue that Google made a series of non-technical mistakes that resulted in a disruption of social expectations. And while it's easy to blame the technology as the point of failure, that was not the case here. And so what we have to do is deconstruct what actually happened, and we can get a sense of how to think about privacy. So I'm going to go through a series of things that I think that they did wrong to give you an insight into what I think you have to think about in terms of privacy. First, Google got themselves into trouble by integrating a public-facing system inside of one of the most intimate private spaces you can imagine. Gmail seems like a logical integration point, right? Because people go there on a regular basis. But the thing is that this means you're juxtaposing something that is very private with something that is very public. And the result is that a lot of users genuinely believed that Google was exposing their private email to all of the people in the world, right? Now, this was never technically the case, but the fact that people thought this shows where the confusion lies, right? And it created an unnecessary panic. People flipped out, and Google had to spend all this time in PR saying, no, we're not actually putting out your email. And again, it's a disconnect because of not the technology, but the expectations. Second, Google assumed that people would opt out of Buzz if they didn't want to participate. Now, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt on this one, because a more insidious framing would be to say that they wanted to force people into opting in, because this makes the service more viral and more monetizable. And I don't want to let conspiracy theories sort of get in the way of my analysis, but I can't help but notice that more and more technology companies are thinking that it's okay to expose people tremendously and then backpedal a couple weeks later when people flip out. Now, many users jumped into Buzz to check it out, clicking through the various things, not really reading anything, just wanting to get to the meat of the product, just getting to see what it was about. They didn't know the service, they didn't know what it was going to be used, they didn't watch the video, right? And so they're trying to get a sense of what's happening. And when they don't know what the value proposition is, they just click and accept defaults. But once you understand something, having to undo the setup is rather tricky and rather confusing. And it's easier for users to flip out rather than to actually go and undo things. And sure enough, because this was situated in Gmail, people were flipping out. And they started to go try to look at how to undo things. And I kept meeting users who thought that if they opted out, they would cancel their Gmail account, right? And that's where we see confusion come into play. Now, you want your services to go viral. If you do, help users understand the proposition. By the time you've built it, you understand the proposition. They're not going to watch your video. You need to ease them in. You need to give them a way of understanding why this matters and invite them to contribute their content. Invite them to contribute their networks. They will once they see what this is about.